Picture this. Twice a year, sometimes more, a single football match literally empties the streets of cities across 6 different continents. Bars in Lagos, Jakarta, Buenos Aires, you name it. They fill up hours before kickoff. Television networks that have never broadcast a Spanish league game in their entire lives suddenly clear their schedules for this one event. Well, welcome to this explainer on El Clásico. Today, we're going to dive deep into the definitive history of Real Madrid versus FC Barcelona and really explore why this is, by almost any measure, the biggest recurring event in club football.
1 billion people, with a B. Depending on the year and the stakes, that's how many fans tune in to watch 22 guys chase a ball across a rectangle of grass. It's staggering, right? But the really strange thing is, out of those 1 billion viewers, very few actually know the deep, political, century-long history behind all of this. I mean, sure, they know the famous goals, they know the superstars, but they don't know that this fixture was forged in the politics of a country that was literally tearing itself apart.
So to make sense of more than a century of matches, our story today relies on 4 specific threads. First up, identity. You'll see that these aren't just football clubs. They represent 2 entirely different visions of Spain itself. Second, politics. This is a rivalry heavily shaped by civil war and dictatorship. Third, individuals. We're talking about the specific players and presidents whose choices actually bent the arc of history. And finally, the arms race. That's a century-long push to just be better, richer, and more inventive than the other guy. Keep these 4 threads in mind, and the rivalry stops being just a blur of famous goals and becomes a truly coherent, fascinating story.
Okay, here is our roadmap for the explainer today, covering 5 defining eras. 1. 2 clubs, 2 Spains. 2. Dictatorship and early betrayals. 3. Stars versus the system. 4. The Golden Age. And 5. The rivalry reinvented. Let's get right into it.
Starting off with Section 1, 2 clubs, 2 Spains. Let's take a look at the origins of this massive divide.
To really understand why these teams hate each other so much, we have to go all the way back to their founding DNA at the turn of the 20th century. Real Madrid was founded right in the capital, the seat of government, and they were actually granted the title Real, which means royal, by King Alfonso XIII in 1920. So they naturally absorbed the centralist establishment identity. Now, FC Barcelona, on the other hand, was founded in an industrial, cosmopolitan port city. They very quickly became a vessel for Catalan pride, which is a regional identity entirely distinct from the capital. So think about it. Before a single competitive match was even played between them, these 2 clubs were already set up as opposing symbols of the Spanish nation.
And those symbols were truly forged in fire. Not long after their foundings, Spain descended into a brutal civil war in 1936, and football essentially became a proxy for that conflict. The absolute most infamous moment of this era happened in 1943 during a cup match. Barcelona had actually won the first leg 3-0. But then, in the return leg in Madrid, they somehow lost 11-1. Now, why such a crazy swing? Well, documented history shows that the Barcelona players were visited by state security forces in their locker room right before the match in a very clear atmosphere of intimidation. Madrid was undeniably a strong team back then, for sure, but Barcelona took the field genuinely terrified, and that single event cemented a deep, enduring narrative of persecution in Catalonia that honestly lasts to this very day.
Moving right along to Section 2, dictatorship and early betrayals, football as a proxy war.
So under Francisco Franco's regime, Catalan language and culture were heavily suppressed. That meant the football stadium became one of the only places where that regional identity could actually be expressed out loud. You can imagine how that set the stage for a massive sense of grievance. The crucial flashpoint arrived in a single, incredibly murky transfer dispute in 1953. Alfredo Di Stefano was widely considered the best player in the world at the time, but his rights were contested by 2 different South American clubs. Barcelona bought him from one, Madrid bought him from the other. The Spanish Federation stepped in with this completely bizarre compromise where they said he would alternate seasons between the 2 clubs. Can you imagine that happening today? No way. Feeling totally manipulated by the establishment, a frustrated Barcelona ultimately withdrew their claim. Di Stefano went to Madrid and subsequently won the first 5 European Cups in a row. For Barcelona fans, this was definitive proof that the system was rigged against them. But for Madrid, it was the birth of their rightful aristocratic dominance in Europe.
But, the pendulum always swings back. Fast forward to 1973, the new best player in the world, a Dutchman named Johan Cruyff, arrived on the scene. And crucially, he deliberately chose Barcelona over Madrid, publicly stating that he simply couldn't play for a club associated with Franco. This was massive. It was a huge psychological boost, and he backed it up on the pitch, immediately leading Barcelona to a 5-0 annihilation of Madrid right in their own stadium. Cruyff gave Barcelona the belief that they couldn't just resist Madrid, but actually humiliate them.
That takes us to Section 3, Stars versus the System. This is where the philosophical divide hardens.
While Cruyff the player was incredible, it was Cruyff the coach in the late 1980s who forever changed the DNA of this rivalry. He introduced what's known as total football. Cruyff essentially rebuilt FC Barcelona entirely around these principles. He demanded that every single youth team at their famed academy La Masia play this exact same way. He built this self-perpetuating football and culture that prized technical excellence and possession above absolutely everything else. Because of him, Barcelona wasn't just a team anymore, it had become a full-blown ideology.
Real Madrid's response to Barcelona's homegrown system was, well, completely different. In 2000, their new president, Florentino Perez, decided his strategy was to just buy all the absolute best players in the world. This became known as the Galacticos era, and he kicked it off by buying Barcelona's very own captain, Luis Figo. It was a betrayal so deep, so completely unthinkable, that when Figo eventually returned to Barcelona to play an away game, the crowd was apoplectic. Believe it or not, a fan actually hurled a severed pig's head onto the pitch. I mean, it's a shocking image, but it perfectly captures the sheer venom and intensity of this rivalry. And that brings us to Section 4, the Golden Age, global saturation, and the ultimate duel. By the late 2000s, this rivalry reached its absolute competitive summit and truly captivated the entire world. Barcelona had perfected Cruyff's system under a brilliant new coach, Pep Guardiola. They called it tiki-taka. It was this beautiful, merciless style of football defined by short passing and suffocating possession. The ultimate vindication of this system came in 2009, when Guardiola's homegrown Barcelona team went into Madrid and utterly destroyed them 6-2. It was just a jaw-dropping result, and it proved to everyone that Barcelona's academy-driven philosophy could conquer the globe.
So to counter this seemingly unbeatable system, Real Madrid brought in Jose Mourinho. This turned the rivalry into the ultimate battle of purist versus pragmatist. Mourinho's sole mission was to break Barcelona's beautiful machine, and he used an unapologetic, confrontational pragmatism to do it. It all bubbled over in the spring of 2011, when they played 4 volatile Clásicos in just 18 days across 3 different competitions. The mind games in the press conferences, the red cards, the touchline brawls. It was football as pure theater, and it completely transformed the Clásico into this massive, can't-miss global media event.
But the true defining feature of this golden age was, without a doubt, the arrival of the 2 greatest players in the world. And they embodied their respective clubs so perfectly it's almost cinematic. On one side, you had Lionel Messi, the small, homegrown artist from La Masia. On the other, Cristiano Ronaldo, the explosive, self-made, expensive Galactico. For nearly a decade, these 2 guys pushed each other to impossible statistical heights, casually scoring over 50 goals a season and trading the Ballon d'Or back and forth year after year. So, the big question, who actually won the Golden Age? Well, they essentially divided the spoils perfectly according to their natures. Barcelona, relying heavily on their system and incredible homegrown talent, claimed domestic supremacy. They won multiple league titles and trebles. Meanwhile, Madrid, relying on their Galactico stars and sheer, unbreakable pragmatism, ruthlessly conquered Europe, taking home an unprecedented 4 Champions Leagues in 5 years. They both achieved historic, legendary greatness, just in entirely different ways.
Finally, we reach Section 5, the rivalry reinvented. Let's talk about rebuilding the cathedrals. Now, obviously, after Ronaldo and Messi eventually left, both clubs faced really painful transitions. They had aging squads, and in Barcelona's case, a totally massive financial crisis. They both had to figure out how to survive in a brand new era. And what did they do? Madrid did exactly what Madrid always does. They opened the checkbook and bought the absolute best next-generation superstars on the planet, guys like Jude Bellingham and Kylian Mbappe. Barcelona, on the other hand, strapped for cash, leaned heavily back into their La Masia academy, promoting these brilliant homegrown teenagers to keep the club afloat. And simultaneously, both clubs decided to undertake massive multi-billion-dollar renovations of their iconic stadiums to maximize future revenue. It really was a complete top-to-bottom reinvention for both of them.
And amidst all this reinvention, something truly incredible happened. 91,553. Let that number sink in. That was the world record attendance at the Camp Nou in 2022 for the Women's Clásico. Barcelona's women's team had become an absolutely dominant global force, and Madrid very quickly started investing heavily just to try and catch up. The rivalry's old, historic energies were suddenly pouring into a brand new arena, proving that its modern evolution is just as explosive and relevant as its past.
This eternal pendulum just keeps swinging right into the present day. Look at the verdict of the 2025-2026 season. It illustrates this perfectly. Madrid comfortably won the October Clásico with their flashy new stars, only for Barcelona to strike back and actually clinch the league title with a May Clásico win of their own. And amazingly, if you can believe it, after more than 124 years and well over 250 brutal competitive matches, their all-time victory count remains almost perfectly tied. You really can't script it any better than that.
Which leaves us with one final, provocative question to wrap things up. Who is going to write the next chapter? Because as long as fans continue to pass down these deeply held allegiances to their kids, and as long as these two vastly different philosophies continue to clash on the pitch, the greatest rivalry in sports will literally never end. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope the next time you tune in, you'll never look at those 90 minutes quite the same way again.